Muito boa tarde a todos. É com muita alegria que a gente vai abrir agora a nossa programação da tarde da Casa Sul Global.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Victoria Brown. I am the MC here at Casa Sul, and I will be guiding you all today. I am going to describe myself. I'm an African Amazonian woman. I have dark brown curly hair. I am wearing a brown dress with golden accessories and wedges. I would like to thank everyone for connecting or for being here today in person. I also wanted to remind you all that we have headsets. And simultaneous translation today into English, Spanish, and Portuguese. I would like to thank Sara and Aridne, our Brazilian Sign Language interpreters, here with us today. Well, we have launched in Belém the first edition Casa Sul Global, which is a symbolic space for political articulation, mobilization, production of knowledge, and collaboration for philanthropy and social environmental justice between different players. We want to impact the flows, resources, and power dynamic. Casa Sul Global is this initiative of Fundos del Sur and Regilon, call of the Brazilian presidency to have a global workforce cooperation between different sectors, peoples, and territories to transform commitments into action. This comes from a collective action through propositions for members, networks, and partnering organizations. The 40 activities that were sent were assessed by a committee with representatives from Brazil, Africa, and Asia, and they recommended which activities were going to be part of our program. We would like to thank everyone who has been part in this. We would also like to thank our funding partners, Baobá, Grupo Volkswagen, Fundo Brazil, Fundo Casa, Socioambiental, Global Giving, Clima e Sociedade, Global Alliance for Green and Gender Action, Itaúsa Próspero Social, Global Fund for Community Foundations, Global Green Grants Fund, BEM-TV, Ibirapitanga, Avina, ACP, Sociedade, População e Natureza, and the Semdana Institute. So let's get started on our session. Youth of the Global South, Decolonizing Climate Financing from the Ground Up. I'm going to turn it over to Regis. I'm going to ask you all to describe yourselves. We have more chairs over here. If we have more people in the audience who wants to sit over here, thank you. Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Well, I just wanted to say hello to all of our audience. I'm going to describe myself to get started. I am a Black man with Black power hair. I have this t-shirt that says, "We can do more." It's a reference, to the fact that when we are together, we can do more. And I have two buttons here from Casa Socioambiental. I am Regis. I work at Casa Socioambiental, and thank you all so much for being here today. Right after lunch, I know it's hard, but we had a couple issues with some of our speakers who got stuck in traffic, but they're on their way. I am going to tell you more about the methodology of our conversation today. The idea is to have an exchange, a dialogue. It's not just us here sitting down and telling you something. We actually want to have a discussion about experiences and distribution of power. The invitation here is to listen actively to the youth, to the investors. So decolonizing financing has to do with that. I'm sure it's going to be great. And if the youth in the Global South had the power to decide where they would get their financing from, their funds from, what would change, do you think? That's a first question. And here we want to talk about the youth in the Global South, and this dynamics also works with our speakers here. And we'll have a second round in which we can ask questions. We can also invite everyone to share their experiences, to have a better debate. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker here, Josimara. So I have a question for you, Josimara Baré, about what you've been developing. Could you tell us more about what you've been developing? Welcome. What do you think means when the political, or actually the indigenous youth, participate in the political decisions? What does that change in terms of autonomy for the territories? Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Josimara. I am an indigenous person. I have long hair, brown skin, yellowish. I'm wearing white pants and a brown blazer. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you to Regis and to Fundo Casa for the invitation to be here. And please feel free. This is our space. It's our home. We usually say that this is the space where we can exchange knowledge and experiences and work together. I usually think that the youth has an important role, an essential role, really, for the future that we want. At the indigenous communities, we usually talk about an intergenerational exchange. I mean, when we have our parents, our grandparents, who are our museums, let's just say, our educators, our scientists, our teachers, and they teach us things that we learn on a daily basis as well. We receive all that knowledge thanks to that intergenerational exchange. And when we think about all this knowledge and we bring that into what we do nowadays, which is working with funding, working with indigenous funding, I think we have this greater responsibility, really. I work with 7 people right now who are making an effort for the fund to continue, and they're all young. That's an interesting characteristic. We're all young and 20 to 35 years old, approximately. And what I notice is that all of us, we had an opportunity to go to university, to be in the academia in a way. So we have agronomists, we have administrators, we have people who had the opportunity to leave those small communities and go to university and then come back to their families and bring some results as well. I think it's nice when we are able to go back to our families and our communities and bring a little bit of what we learned back to the community. It is a difficult process, of course. And I say difficult because we are taken away from our common environment. We miss our food, we miss the weather, we miss the family, and then we're there in the city, But we learn a lot, and that's necessary for our development and the development of what we do with the communities. But anyway, that's what I wanted to mention here about the role of the youth in building new futures. Our parents are going to leave a day, are going to go away, and same thing with our grandparents, and we have to continue what they started. We usually say that we're just actually continuing with our parents, our grandparents started. We're fighting for the land, for the protection of our territories, and we're fighting for the lives of our family members. I think it's important for us to think about the responsibility that we have to continue on this path. Again, it's a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you. Excellent. A round of applause. Thank you, Josimara. I think what you're saying about the different generations makes a lot of sense. We have to be thankful for being in these spaces, but we have to recognize that we're only here today thanks to the people who paved the way for us. And when it comes to lessons learned, it's nice. It's nice to see Indigenous leaders working with funds, with the youth. It's nice to see all that coming together. So much diversity, which we see not just at the fund, your fund, but also in different structures. It's great. Now let's continue with our debate. I am going to invite my other colleague here to share the experience of the Global Fund for Children. How do you help children thanks to philanthropy? First of all, good afternoon, everyone. I am Thalita, but you can call me Tali. Before I answer that question, I'm going to also tell you a little bit about myself. I think those who are building these processes also have to understand who is in this trajectory, right? All these spaces, they're political as well. So when we're talking about decolonization, of philanthropy from the global south, we also have to understand who is there, who is occupying that space. So I'm very happy with this table. Mahaya and Lisa are still not here, but it's nice to have this moment sharing with other peers and exchanging so many ideas. I am Talita. I am a Black woman. I have short hair, colored hair. I have a floral dress. I'm wearing glasses. I come from the eastern zone of Manaus, eastern region of Manaus. I'm a climate activist. And I think this goes to complement what Regis and Josimara mentioned. We need to understand where philanthropy comes from, where we see this need to talk about climate justice. I think this table is quite symbolic because a while ago we didn't have any Indigenous leaders in these spaces or Black people. And that is changing now. We're thinking about the constitution of our country. We see that we had 500 years of slavery, and when we think about the rights of these people, the Indigenous peoples, Black people in this African diaspora, when we stop to think about the secular structure that we have, we've only had the federal constitution for 37 years. So what is 37 years in face of 5 centuries of slavery for our bodies. It's important to say that because we're not just talking about decolonizing, which is unlearn to learn again, but also we have to think about how we're going to build trust, how we're going to understand that our bodies are adapting to all these systems they have been adapting for so long. So we are already adapting, we are building trust. This is not even a recognition anymore. It's really historic repair with what's ours. And even in the 60s, more than 50% of our population was illiterate. So historically, we are subrepresented in all of the spaces, in politics and philanthropy, in all of these spaces. So that's why we have to see how we're building this process within philanthropy, to have participation, to have more than that. It's not just taking a picture and saying we're participating. We have to think about the distribution of power and this historical repair, as I was saying. We are here as the youth, but we're here with the legacy and continuity of a struggle. Everything that we had, that we got in the past few years comes from what was started in the past in the Indigenous and Black movements in Brazil. So we have to keep that in mind. Otherwise, we'll just romanticize this space. And actually, philanthropy can only exist because we did something wrong in the past. I mean, not us, because we were not there, but there were mistakes in the past. And that's something that continues until now. So colonization never really stopped in our country, in our region. Now, for instance, the Guarani Kaiowá are in a concentration camp. They're throwing a lot of poison there, of defensives, and they're trying to resist, but it's very complicated. So how can we talk about philanthropy as responsible for it, We're talking about access to resources, which is something that we're lacking in our territories. But it's not just about that. It's access to education as well in this process. I mean, how do we send resources to people, especially when we're talking about the youth? Many times they're receiving that for the first time. They don't know how to manage that. We are trying to help with philanthropy. We are trying to remove a lot of the bureaucracy that exists, but that's not the reality of the traditional philanthropy. So how do we prepare people, these groups, to think about having autonomy? Otherwise, they'll be just depending on us, on our support. They actually have to go through a process of education. So anyway, I'm thinking that the idea is really to have this exchange with other perspectives and repertoires. So the Global Fund for Children has over 25 years. It acts globally in the Americas, in Asia, in Africa. We also work with, education, empowerment of the youth, and through gender justice as well. And here in Brazil, we've been here for 3 years supporting different groups through Brincar, this project. And I think it's important to bring children into this as well. I think children are the ones who deal with the processes and, they are already dealing with that. So how do we see the youth children as political subjects as well, because they also have a vision of the world. So within all that, in the past few months, we've been trying to build things with 43 different groups in 17 states in Brazil. We have built some climate solutions about the role of philanthropy in the struggle for justice. We've been trying to build narratives, conditioning, visual identity was also done in a collaborative way. And we have 21 ideas on how the youth sees philanthropy as an ally in this, thinking about climate crisis. And actually, I was listening to one of our colleagues saying that when we think about that, we're thinking about the beginning and an end. But now we have a new model of our world. I mean, the thing is how we deal with this new context from now on, how we understand that this shows inequality that was built by some throughout this process. So we are the global south, we're the periphery of the world because we've always been looking at people taking our territory, taking our knowledge. We've seen so many things happening. And we've also supported some groups through different projects and thinking about climate justice in a broad way, thinking about gender justice, human rights, public safety, and many other processes that have to do with our territories and communities. Anyway, I think that's what I wanted to share with you. I think we'll continue to share here with active listening, and we'll also see what experiences everyone can share here in this conversation. Thank you.
Obrigado, Thalita. Acho importante o que você traz sobre ocupar esses espaços.
Thank you so much, Thalita. It was great, really, what you said, to occupy those spaces with our bodies, really, not only with our accreditations. So it's a way of really being present, especially in some places that were not thought for us, not made for us. So it is indeed a very symbolic moment, an important one, and for us to live and to receive COP30 here in the Amazon region together with Latin American countries, all languages involved, so many regions that are really represented, and happy to be here in such a meeting in a country where democracy still exists. I would like to thank very much all of those who are here today, and I would like to pass the floor to Larissa Moraes. She will answer the question, in which way can organized youth really be present in terms of decision-making, philanthropy, and climatic negotiation so that they are more inclusive and representative? First of all, I would like to greet you all. I'm very sorry it was late. I had some trouble getting here because of traffic jams. But to be honest, I'm very, very honest to be here and to be able to talk with you all about this topic. And yes, I have to also describe myself. Thank you. So I am a Black woman, light skin. I have dreadlocks. I have a earring that I got as a gift. I have a long pants, gray. I'm wearing sneakers, and I have also a shirt, a local kind of tissue. And I am one of the Engajamundo members, an organization that exists since 2013, and that really thinks about youth in a model that is very different from what we have seen in terms of what I've seen, in terms of NGOs. So here, things are not horizontal, but we really seek at all times to be as open as possible. And it is indeed a very important way of dealing. This is organization of youth, for the youth, by youngsters as well. Many times we're doing things for the first time. So there are mistakes as well, but that's what allows us to be really what we are. And so I was not the one who founded the organization. We had 5 women from São Paulo in 2013. They had that great idea of organizing youngsters for decision-making processes. And since then, the dream is being passed down generation from generation. I am the 5th generation of chairs. We had Talia as well. She was the first one representing the North region 2 years after Ana Rosa and I joined the team. I am from Belém, and I believe really that it's as if it was a lab, allowing us at this stage, in this moment, to produce worlds in which we trust. We are an organization that it belongs to civil society. It's not a philanthropy. It has 300 volunteers all over the country. And from work we do in local places, 24 cities, nationally and internationally, we try to take what is proper from youngsters, their spaces for decision-making processes. I was invited to partake in this roundtable, and I was thinking, how can I talk from my place to think philanthropy from our standpoint? So some figures can be mentioned that would be important. How do youngsters exist in this space? So it's important to say that when we're talking about youngsters, I'm talking about youngsters in the plural. We have really quite a diversity. We're talking of a country with continental dimensions and with a lot of inequity, social, economic, and that we did not yet manage our wounds, our sadnesses. So when we look historically, what has made our country, slavery, problems with land regulation, dictatorships, so on and so forth, this creates wounds that have not been properly treated. So it makes part of that big pot in which we then have to put together those youngsters to think as subjects they were in a certain context. Indeed, those youngsters pertain to many organizations, groups, so it's a huge diversity, really. And we are talking really in terms of philanthropy that it starts from a deficiency of the state's action, money then coming from to deal with what the state was not able. There is a lack then somewhere. The state was not able to deal with that. There is a gap. So people tend to say charity, philanthropy. I'm here to help you from my knowledge and from my money, my resources. I am here then to give you as if it was a small amount of money to help you to do charity and to help. But this charity, that help, and in terms of money as well, it's important to say that if we think in terms of philanthropy, how they help climate, we have $200 million for United States, 20 million for Europe, and 5 for Brazil. And we are thinking about all the climate portfolio. So we're not even talking about youngsters precisely. That is to say that a fund for climate justice for youngsters, between 2022 and 2024, a research was done, only 0.96% of those big funds really help youngsters and young groups. So when I look at that, when we see those figures, indeed, there is a situation in which, well, there's a funnel. The United States receiving a lot, then Europe, And then when we look at Brazil, 5 million for all the organizations working with climate. So youngsters really have a portion of that. Now, something I always say since I started, that we do a lot with very little. And philanthropy, in a way, has, well, accustomed itself to work with improvisation in a huge struggle. But how can we work without such struggle? The other organizations, then not all of them have to do the same thing. So this is to say, and I was saying to a financer myself, that system, the way money is organized and distributed, it generates in the social society a scenario in which there is no space for everyone. There is no money for everyone. It's as if it was a voracious games, Hunger Games. So one has to be a climatic influencer, and that's more about a me, a certain ego, and not us, a collective. So for one to get a resource, someone else must not receive it. Now, how can we understand not only to think on multiplying those resources, but in a way to change philanthropy so that it does not promote dispute in contexts that are already oriented towards chaos? So, in terms of resources disputes, we won't be able to have an ecosystem, a scenario that will promote collaboration between organizations. So one of the main points for us when we look to philanthropy's duty and processes of interconnection with youngsters, how in this process, where we cannot choose everyone, how can we then not have that one as a field of dispute as well? So indeed, and I wanted to share with you a case study, a project we are testing this year. We had a dream at some point. We thought Engaje would be able to do this only in a 10 years time, but we managed to do that before. So we were surprised and it was great. It happened as soon as the girls funded the organizations. They wanted to have in 5 or 6 years a moment to be heard at the United Nations. And that dream that Engajamundo could support and strengthen other youngsters besides our voluntary network, we thought that that would be something really for the very long term. But last year we managed to have that possibility. We can open a call for proposals ourselves to strengthen and support youngsters in the northeast region of Brazil. The call for proposals is now open. It will close tomorrow, and it's called Utopias. It will till the 26th. That's Wednesday, actually. Next week, we will be supporting 4 projects in 20,000 reais and 2 of them in 10,000 reais. Those will be the first resources those projects will receive the first time in their lives. So we wanted really to have new ideas, new projects, and to strengthen them. That's something that we created, and we were directed after there was a consultation and assessment, and we thought at different times what Engajamundo needed to give that support. We invited 4 youngsters, activists from the Northeast region as well, to help us and broaden those criteria. What was necessary for that call for proposals to really show the reality of a territory and to dialogue with the needs of those that are looking for financing in that space. So we will open the call for proposals, and where we will have 3 groups in the selection panel, the selection committee, with youngsters, women, and groups working in the Northeast region for those call for proposals. So that is an effort. We are sure we won't be able to deal with everything, but it's an opportunity, and we can show what it can mean. So we really have to be available. We really have to try, even though we cannot have huge results or a promotion for oneself. So thank you very much. Thank you, Larissa, very much. It's indeed very important what you say, especially when you have figures, when you talk about history, when you talk about the diversity, plurality of youngsters. So indeed, we are not in little boxes, and we can be everywhere. And I know that the work you've been doing at Engaja is so important. So many spaces where you've been working in. So when you talk about philanthropy and to be created in that place of charity, philanthropy itself, maybe not everyone understands. It's something that comes from the global north that is imposed here. And we see structures in the global south also fighting to change what it means, philanthropy. In Brazil, we see networks as the Comoa network working for philanthropy, social, environmental justice, a structure with 18 funds and organizations, independent donors as well, ensuring that these resources really answer the demand of the grassroots organizations, those in the front lines that may not have received any resources. So for youngsters and all our organizations, it's very important to have that first help, that first support. So thank you so much, and congratulations on the call for proposals you will have. That is really something amazing, and we will be glad to help if we can in any way. Now, I would like to pass the floor to our mediator. She will also be a panelist, and she will talk about what it means to be a youngster and to be in a Brazilian fund for the education. You're the president of this fund. You're in many different spaces dealing with the demands and voices of youngsters. I'll pass you the floor. Good afternoon to you all. Good afternoon. I'm Amahayan Sampaio. I'm a Black woman. I am young, dark skinned, 25 years old. My hair is curly. My hair is also tied back, and I have a pink blouse. I have long pants, color dark white, and I'm always wearing a necklace and earrings with wooden motifs, local motifs as well. It's a pleasure for me to be here today with so many youngsters, a pleasure to bring the standpoint of youngsters in terms of philanthropy. We know there's a lot to do, whether it's youngsters being at stage, really deciding, receiving. And when I say youngsters and what we have, our struggles, our challenges, but to produce as a solution, youngsters are a bit in those two worlds. Many times we say, and it's true, that youngsters will be those who will suffer the most climate change. Indeed, we'll live here a little longer, and we are being already affected. But we are not only those who receive resources, but we articulate as well with organization, grassroots groups, and to see youngsters as professionals, our capacity building, and how indeed we can become leaders of big funds. Normally, we are then in both places, because I am a president of Fumbeia and Instituto Perifa Sustentável. It's a grassroots organization that started its first support for receiving from Fundo Casa, Socioambiental, from the Comoa network, and our last resource was also from the social environmental house in Comoa. So youngsters really need the resources. And we have been doing a lot with very little, and things cannot continue like this with those colonial logics. Youngsters, especially Indigenous First Nations, Black youngsters, we have 28 traditional communities recognized in Brazil of many different territories. We talk about different biomes as well. And to think that youngsters have done a lot. But this is not a logical way of moving forward. That is to say, like Larissa, when she was saying that media has occupied an important place and we use it too as a tool. It's very important to look at this place and to train communicators and more than influencers of climate. We need people that are brave, courageous. It's very important to communicate. So that's something we have to recognize, and not all organization or institute or association or activist or fund must be in social network, not all of them. To think about a strategy of many organizations and funds, sometimes it's not interesting even to be present. And there's something I say a lot in philanthropy. There are funds and other organizations, and to think in that logic, that is, we have to talk about a fund, we have to talk about the projects also that are supported by them. And that is something very good as well, to rethink those communication logics. I'm very happy at the Fumbeia. Our team is very inclusive, a very open team we have as well. It's a great place for us to be. And we sometimes say we are Funbelas, the beauties of those funds, because many of us are women, and indeed it changes the way of understanding philanthropy. When we work with diversity, with people, with our colleagues, personnel, well, it changes a lot, really. And that's very important for us. It's not only about representativity, but it's a way of looking. It's a perspective. From when we support a call or when we organize one, when we talk about Black women deciding, youngsters, women, we're not talking about a diversity token to be filled, but we want youngsters to know what they need, and for Black women to say how and what really hurts. So gender perspective, gender driven as a way of seeing the world. When we look at those professionals that are occupying diverse bodies, committees, we know that to have those professionals, to think diversity, inclusiveness, that's not just an ornament, that's something very serious, and that really changes things. So to use demands that come from the territory, that's really important. We are supporting today 75 youngsters of the north of São Paulo, and there are different groups working with communications. We have called for proposals for youngsters, communications in terms of capacity building, because it's a fund very much connected to territories. That is very important for us. And what does the territory need? What are their demands? And from there on, we start to restructure, to look at all those places of support and how and when. So that's great. I'm happy to see it's a call for youngsters, but we are working in communication. We don't want to exclude traditional practices that already exist in the territory in terms of capacity building. When we talk about youngsters, we always say we don't want to reinvent things. We want really to strengthen those capacities, and that's very important as well, to have them working environment in a proper manner. It's a fundamental dialogue, and really all the strength, artistic and cultural, that we have in our territories. So recently we had Climate in Movement, that's kind of our climatic Lulapalooza, with capoeira, with samba music that was amazing, and other manifestations as well that were there to communicate about climate, and artistic organizations as well. So that process is very important, especially when it leaves the classroom and it goes to other contexts, associations, movements, not only in institutes, but movements that do not have, for instance, in terms of legal entities with a number, but we are really thinking about everyone, those that are doing grassroots basic organization. And the youngsters have to understand that together with different groups, we want that place, that voice that already exists, because it's not just about hearing, not just about allowing youngsters to speak, but we have to hear them properly. So indeed, we are here today, very much present at the COP30 in both institutes. Igor, Mari as representatives, and with Fundea as well. We are here for the first time. We have an artist, Brenauta from the Kaisara First Nation. He had the opportunity as an artist to perform as well, and it's so important to say and to fight for those rights. We had 65 people dead, for instance, at the accident that happened in São Paulo. So art can be present to make us think, culture as well, audiovisual tools to promote awareness, understanding. So the perspective, the point of view, the standpoint of the youngsters, that's what we want and we want to support. And that is so fundamental to have that play, that space, capacity building, mentors, working for youngsters, by youngsters, and to give them a proper shelter. So today, especially with Perifa, to be in the territories of the North Kaisara territories, so important, so powerful, a lot of respect. For me, it's very important to be in that place, to understand and to promote the power of youngsters. Our youngsters then together are very strong, and that's something so beautiful to see.
O que falar, né, depois de 4 exposições tão fortes, tão potentes.
So powerful what we heard in those four, with those four speakers. So now we move to a second moment where we will have really the possibility to have Q&As. But before, I myself would like to speak a little about Fundo Casa and how we made our sort of youngsters to be present, not only as beneficiaries, but part of the construction. Now, in terms of where I come and my origins, I come from Rutî, São Paulo, one of the greenest cities of the state, considered together with São Lourenço the portal of the Mata Atlântica region. So a little portion that is still preserved, and precisely to talk about all the other biomes at this COP. It's really important to talk about territory. I work as a manager for those funds, Casa Socioambiental funds, to support initiatives and organizations, grassroots, that are that have as leaders activists in all of the states of Brazil. We are born of the South American Fund that understands that bioma has no borders, and in that logic of supporting all of the region, the Amazon region, north, for instance, from Amazon region that is in 9 countries, and the only Brazilian bioma is Caatinga. So we have to ensure that resources get to all the initiatives in all of those biomas. So that now to talk about experiences and what I've learned and developed at Fundo Casa, I can say that we had a call for youngsters, traditional and from outskirts of cities, facing environmental racism, and we wanted to support youngsters. This was a very nice construction, and indeed, like the energy we had here in terms of collective building, in terms of including youngsters, not to be, we don't want to be used as tokens for inclusion, just say that there are youngsters present, but to really be present. And that's something very symbolic, because in COP28, Fundo Casa then calls for a debate, and those present to know what is the importance of the financing, for it to get to organizations led by youngsters, and why does that not happen? What are the difficulties? And what was to be a meeting in a room with 8 people? The Brazilian youngsters, they really wanted so badly to discuss financing that we are occupying the Brazilian pavilion. 30 youngsters from 35 modems of climate. So it was a very nice building, very nice process, very inclusive as well, cooperation, where Fundo Casa really heard what were our demands. So besides what was mentioned here, having youngsters as beneficiaries, to have it included in all the processes. At COP28, when we wrote also the calls, when we assessed the proposals, to follow as well, and its realization. So youngsters are not only the beneficiaries, but part of the whole construction. And that's really important, and it's only possible to do that when we have youngsters in all those areas working properly with global funds, national youngsters funds, presidency of a First Nations fund. So indeed, for youngsters to be in all of those spaces and to ensure that our demands are really heard. This is something where we managed with our resources to support 35 youngsters of organizations in 18 states of our country, Brazil. 7 million reais directly went to those youngsters. And it's nice to say that from those 35 organizations, 27 were associations and informal as well, collective, with no legal entity constituted. But they could partake, because youngsters many times are not formalized, they're not legal entities, because, well, it takes some time to understand. But we want to partake in calls and to start our struggles. Sometimes they ask for 3 or 5 years of experience. They ask to have an audit, and one hasn't even had the opportunity to have any access to resources. So in terms of social justice, environmental justice, that's very important. That's where the donation based on trust, to trust that this first help, this first support will be so important for the organization. It'll be able to occupy other spaces doing so. And beyond those dates and history, one has to say that youngsters have a way of translating what is discussed in those meetings in a language that belongs to territory. One of the projects we supported brought only not data but history, Ciclolog, Socioambiental, Favela, projects where they wanted to talk about environmental racism, and people suffer with that, but might not know its name, might not be completely aware. So the idea was to have short film explaining what environmental racism is, and to have it really in the outskirts, shanty towns, to have it in cars being promoted and said in loudspeakers. So that's very important. Agents of transformation, translation, communication of what is discussed in those spaces. Important to go back to our territories and tell back to them what has been discussed, what is mitigation, resilience, adaptation, and so many other terms that we use here. During the whole COP, we learn different terms. We have to understand what people say. Those who are on the front lines, they know what is happening and what how the territories are suffering, what is environmental racism, what it means to have to adapt to climate change, and that is so important. We work with youngsters not only in that call, but going deeper in terms of researchers of Saberes, where I had the opportunity myself at Rede Como. That's an initiative that calls and incentivize the production of narratives from territories and with the experience of a civil society. In that research, with financing social, environmental justice, the work of philanthropy communities, with the experience of Fundo Casa we have the last 5 years, and we can do an understanding and consciousness of what came as demands and what we managed to support. We had 500 projects that we received of organizations, really that projects that were really done by youngsters, and we were able to support 43% of the demand we had. And that's indeed when we talk about the dispute for someone to earn, to win a project, someone else will not get it. Well, yes, that's the problem. There is a shortage. We had demands of 13 million, and we were able to support 12 million in 24 states of Brazil. That's very important data as well.
This is important because we can select projects from certain criteria. So before the public notice goes live, organizations led by women and youth have better score. Those who never had access before, they have a better score as well. The idea is that from the very beginning, they can develop what they want in their territories with more dignity because they do a lot with very little. So it's not just about financial resources, it's also about their abilities, their skills, so they can be ready to access other structures as well. And I think we can now have a Q&A. We have 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes before we wrap up. And Josie, I think you needed a few more minutes, right? I think you thought it was going to be a quick intro, but anyway, I think you can still share more about this perspective of the youth. So about this second round, I think I'm going to turn it over to you to mediate this debate. And the idea is to ask the youth and the investors who are here in the audience what they think. Excellent, very good. We know that we don't just have young people here, we have funding partners, we have different funds here who will look at the youth, at women. Anyway, I think it's important to understand how you all see the following. I like to talk about data, so I have a double question here for you. Please feel free to answer or comment on these questions, okay? So first of all, how do you see the importance that support to the youth and to young organizations is done? And also, do you have any data? Can you tell? I mean, for the funds who don't have a call for the youth, do you think you can measure that? Do you know how many young groups are receiving that kind of support? Are they from traditional territories, or are they Black groups, or women, or, I think it would be nice to have that kind of information. And if you've never thought about it, maybe it's time we did that to include the youth. So what do you say? What can you tell me about that? We have a question over here. You can come to the stage. Hi, good afternoon. I am Raquel from the Apxana people in Roraima, north of Brazil. I work with the Indigenous young population in 10 regions in Roraima. We work with different communities in our territory, and I think it's important to talk about the youth because we work within the territory. It's something that goes beyond this space. I mean, this is a part of what we do, but what happens really that matters is in the territory where we're running our projects with the youth. So when it comes to financing for the youth, we don't really see that in the organizations, in the institutions. It's very easy to talk about the youth, use the youth as backdrop, let's just say. But when it's time to really assign those resources to the youth, it doesn't happen. So there's a percentage of people, where they say that the youth is included, but it's not. So anyway, I think it's important for us to reinforce that the youth needs direct financing as well, so that our actions can go, beyond what we already do. And again, I wanted to congratulate everyone working with the indigenous population, the youth in Roraima, the north of Brazil. I think this is a good way for them to be good leaders in meetings, congresses, assemblies. I think this is essential, really, within the political incidence spaces, both national and international spaces, to also show the work of the youth in the territory. Thank you. Excellent. It's good to hear that kind of comment. There's one more thing, actually, that I was thinking as you were saying that. We have a lot of young people present here, and I think it's important to hear about the barriers, the difficulties for these territories. And at the same time, when you talk about difficulties and barriers, we know that it's not for every fund. We know that not every fund is doing that today, but it's important to listen to the philanthropy perspective as well. I mean, those working with the youth, how are they doing that? And those who are not, what kind of barriers do they find? Why haven't they started? We have another question over here. Hello, good afternoon. I am Christina. I'm the coordinator for engagement at Cuida Network, which is a network in the Amazon for the youth. We are present in 15 different units and one APA to also make decisions in the places where they live. One of the members in our team is a president of one of the units in Santarém Novo. We have people who are already part of the decision-making committee, and I am studying engineering at UFRA. So we have this network, this support network. Of course, financial resources have to be revisited, as was said before, but we have certain partners that help us. By the way, Ali, thank you. And we also have the Casa Socioambiental, Fundo Casa, Fundo Brazil. They're our partners. By the way, thank you very much for being our partners. And I wanted to reinforce, highlight the importance of educating the youth. We need to train our youth so they understand how important it is to defend their territory. If we don't defend our territory, nobody's going to do that for us. So we have to show them how to do it. It is about environmental education as well. Not every young person living there has, the awareness of how their territories are being impacted. So that's what we do. We also launched a book about that with our units. We are now working with Casa to show that to more people. So you might have seen that on Instagram. Anyway, I wanted to come and say thank you for the invitation and highlight the importance of valuing and rescuing the youth. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you.
Oi, tudo bem? Meu nome é Thaís.
Hello, I am Thais. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. I don't officially work with this, but I do have many contacts in different indigenous peoples. And every time I open a public notice, I try to help them to write when they apply. There are many organizations that already have a structure to write public notices easily, but many other organizations still find it hard. And I see the power, right, of that. We see that the organizations here are trying to decolonize the process for applying. So my question is, what can we do that is more innovative to make this more accessible with different levels as well? For 100,000, we need a certain level of accountability in terms of where that resource is going to be used. But there are other resources that we can access applying via WhatsApp, for instance, without having to, do anything huge. Most of my time, really, I spend it thinking about the project, the public notices, the goals, the results. And then all that is forgotten later, and we lose a lot of time at the territories doing that. So we're training people at the Xingu and communities about that. And at the educational forum, I heard that there are so many communities that, cannot follow through with opening a company, doing the payments, etc. They don't know how to do it. So there's goodwill. There's a will to do things right, but there is so much bureaucracy, and that stops people from doing what they are trying to do. There's also the recent public notice of the Chico Mendez Institute. You could send videos, you could send audio messages. It was easy to apply. I helped a lot of young people to do that. It was great. It was a great methodology. There was no need to have a registry for a company. Just had to be a young individual and show your trajectory. Thank you.
Esse lugar da regularização que a gente falou, inclusive de CNPJ, acaba sendo lugar
muito excludente. Many times you need to register a company, and that really excludes a lot of people. Actually, there is an interesting practice of Fumbea. We talk about supporting collectives and institutes and all that, and that's very important. And many times that is going to allow that company to work, but many times doesn't make sense to support a company. It's better to support a movement, We don't necessarily need to make that go into regularization. It's actually one of the demands. When we listen to the movement, we hear that from people. Regulating is not necessarily good for the movement many times. And then the territory has to show us that, has to tell us that. So thinking about support for individuals, collectives, associations that don't have a registered company number, well, it opens a precedent. Okay, let's see if we have any other comments. Well, I am Kika. My name is Kika, and I'm here to talk about this important topic. I don't know how many funding partners there are here, but I am the executive director of ACP. Money is from the Raya Drogazil drugstore chain. The money is of the family, not the company, so it's private money. So it depends on the donations of these people who are choosing to get a bit of their money and put that into an organization. Our focus is institutional development of civil society organizations in Brazil, so we do not work with a cause. We actually try to strengthen the civil society in Brazil. I am an executive director, so I have to render information to my donors. So I have to make them happy and maybe donate even more next year. And I also have to listen to the needs of the organizations that we support and the ones we don't support also. I am in the world of philanthropy and the debate, Reconfiguring, GIF, so I'm trying to remove a little bit of the bureaucracy, make it more simple, really. But there are limitations, of course, because I have to take care of the donors. If tomorrow the donors wake up and say, I no longer want to donate, it's their right. It is their money, after all. So I'm saying all this because when we're in this other place, it's interesting to think about what it is like to be in this other place, how we dialogue with that. So today, we don't have a specific cause. We support many different causes. We have a strategy in that regard. We are very focused on our strategy, but since we don't have a specific cause, there is a good possibility of choice within that. One of the things that the founder decided to do, Antonio Carlos, one of the things that he likes as a former CEO of a large company is the youth. He likes the youth. He loves the youth. He's happy to see young people trying to transform communities, do something new. So that's a very good thing. When we're choosing organizations, we're proposing possibilities of organizations, that's an important point. Of course, we have to think about how that youth is willing to work. There are different narratives, there are different ways, of working that will be more aligned, more of a synergy with what the family likes, and some others that don't. So there are things that I've learned about that I've understood about it. It's important for them to see the youth as entrepreneurs. They come from the private sector, and that's a very important thing. And being an entrepreneur is not selling necessarily, it's creating something, it's articulating. Another important thing is governance within these initiatives. So is there a structure for governance? What kind of structure do they have? One of the things that was supported was the Instituto Baixada in Maranhão. And I remember when he was talking to the leaders at the time, one of them was Gianni, he was very impressed at the governance system, which was horizontal in that community. He said, wow, a 20-year-old woman was able to do that. It's amazing. Anyway, I just wanted to share what I've learned to also inspire you if you're trying to find more resources, and that brings that dialogue with my other colleague here. And by the way, we have an initiative, which is the joint platform, where we try to show opportunities for funding. It's conjunta.org. So if you want to join the community, join the platform, it's really nice. It's about that challenge. How do I write a public notice? How do I apply to something? How do I find opportunities? Anyway, we try to put everything in one place, like a one-stop shop, so that more people have access. We're willing to help with publishing opportunities for more people. Thank you. Oh, and by the way, I also work with Fundo. So it's very nice to be here. Very well. I hope you've paid attention to all these tips. Hello. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. Good afternoon. I am Raíza, she, her, and I am from a climate consultancy organization. And my question is the following. We have advanced so much in our speech, in the way we want things to be done. There's a certain consensus in that regard and why we're here. And I think a lot of what we do has to do with our intermediaries as well. My question is, how do we make sure that we reach philanthropies related to individuals? How do we get to the organizations that are mobilizing a lot of money? How do we advance in that regard? I don't like that idea of a bubble. A bubble exists for a reason. I think we should be in a bubble with those who are building stuff with us together. But beyond that, how do we deal with, more opportunities? That's my question.
Gente, acho que foi lugar muito rico. Eu fiquei muito feliz com o fato da gente
great discussion. I am so happy because we have young people, we have different layers here. It's nice to think about this diagnosis of what is working, what is not working. We need to hear all that. And at the same time, when we talk about support for the young, the youth, we know how to do a lot of things. There's a lot of stigma as well in terms of not being ready for certain things. We have many different actions. We carry this stigma of young people who have a lot of possibilities, but potential for something, but it's not just about the potential. We are doing a lot of things. Potential is looking at someone and saying, wow, they can do a lot, but we are already doing a lot. It's good to hear from you. I think maybe we can have just a couple final messages here. I think we have no time for questions, so maybe just a final message. I wanted to thank you all for coming. I just wanted to say that the Brazilian Fund for Environmental Education, Fundo, is here at your disposal. We were talking about co-responsibility as well. Maybe we can wrap up talking about that. What our commitment is, and as youth, how we want to be seen. I think as a young person, I want to be seen as a young person that is a leader in your organization. I'm sure most of the young people want to be seen like that, to be talking about their projects and not adapting their projects just for a funding partner to understand how we can do things together. And at the same time, I think as Umbea, as a funding organization, I wanted to show you the perspective and commitment of listening to the youth and the territories when we think about support. So one of the initiatives has to do with our guidelines with environmental education, which we built with activists and organizations. And the field of philanthropy should take that as well, should use it, should listen to the people they're willing to support, the youth, Black people, women, everyone. Listening actively is the foundation for real transformation. Thank you.
Bom, só fazendo uma complementação rápida da minha fala, eu venho representando fundo indígena.
Well, I'm here representing an indigenous fund, Narita. It's a fund that brings a lot of innovation in terms of financing, as was said here as well by you. There are challenges in access to resources, and our fund has innovated in the sense that we don't transfer money. I mean, it is a bridge, but it's not the main thing. So our fund has a shared management of resources with the territories, communities, families, regions. They will register according to the demands that they have, and then our organization has the responsibility to absorb in many millions of hectares. So in that reality, these strategies are extremely important. It is a way for us to have new worlds, to be creative. Our colleague has also talked about the possibility of creating public notices that are adapted to the reality in the different territories. I mean, why not have also a notice in audio? I mean, so it's easier for them. For a long time, we had to adapt to the Western world, and now we're putting some other possibilities on the table. We're also creating, we're also coming up with revolutionary propositions. We are transforming things now. It is a moment of change for the indigenous peoples, where we have different initiatives and propositions based on what's necessary. If we want great change, whether it's for climate or anything, we also need to be willing to apply those changes. So we have a recent fund, it's been around for a year and a half, and the youth is working with governance in this fund. We have a way to monitor projects based on the youth that is living in the communities. So this monitoring happens and is done by those who are at the territories. They're our eyes, our ears, they're the people who guarantee that the projects can be done. So we try to work with the youth, so they're responsible, so they have a role in governance as well. We're respecting the elderly, but we also understand that it's necessary to bring the youth to this conversation. As I said in the beginning, this was a great discussion. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Boa tarde, gente. Queria novamente agradecer a presença de vocês.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for coming. Really, it's an important debate, and it's an honor for me to share a roundtable with so many inspiring women. As a young person, I think we just wanted to tell our funding partners, let's think about building together. And for the youth who's present, let's continue to call these funding partners and invite them to have a debate and say, okay, how can we work in a collective way? We are inspiring ourselves in co-creation. We're trying to some perspectives. We've been doing that for 20 years. So I really hope this is going to last for a while. We had 2 more questions, but we no longer have time, but we'll be around and I'm at your disposal if you have any questions during the breaks. Thank you.
Também começo agradecendo a possibilidade, agradeço também a confiança do Fundo Casa por ter chamado a gente para.
Thank you to Fundo Casa for inviting us. Such a great discussion this afternoon. As a young person who has been working with these processes for wealth distribution and power dynamics, etc., I think we have to think about this commitment. How can we continue to build collaborative processes? Our intent is to understand the different groups that there are in our country working with the youth, and we also have to think about better support in terms of resources and time. We want to have flexibility when it comes to resources. We want to have simple reports, less bureaucracy. We don't usually ask for an invoice to these groups because we are working with trust. We know that they're working in their territories. And we've been thinking about supporting emergencies as well. We've been thinking about safety, care, well-being in the context that we live now, more far-right movements, etc. So thinking about our physical integrity, our physical safety, institutional safety, criminalization of organizations as well, and psychosocial safety. So basically, the mental health of the youth dealing with all these issues. So it all comes back to well-being of the youth. I think we have 21 recommendations for the youth when it comes to philanthropy and philanthropy-related activities. This is something that we have built together, and we have a role, a responsibility to think about these recommendations. We want to make sure that we're respecting the knowledge and the way of living of the different communities and the youth as well in this new world. Thank you.
Bom, eu acho que eu fiquei com o último até logo. Então, vou repetir pouco do que foi trazido.
I am going to wrap up the session. I would like to thank you. We're almost at the end of COP30, and for me, it has been a privilege to be here and in this roundtable as well, talking to all of you. This is a very important discussion in terms also of resources, how to access them. We're working with the civil society and philanthropy. It's very nice to have this conversation with you. So thank you once again as an individual, as Larissa, but also as a speaker here with you. I wanted to invite everyone, all of the organizations based in the northeastern region of Brazil, to participate in the new public notice that has been launched. And just to wrap up, I would say that an important thing for us here is to think about how funds and organizations working with the youth understand ways to strengthen networks. We need to have spaces that are in fact collaborative and collective. And even when facing a reality, a difficult reality, even in face of all that, hopefully we'll see that these movements, they are done as a collective. As was said here before, we need to think about not just reinventing the wheel. We have to learn from the youth already working in these processes. Way before Greta was famous, a lot of people have been doing this for a while. So how do we see this path, right? Thank you. Thank you. Let me turn it over to Victoria now to wrap. Thank you.
Boa tarde, gente.
Hello, good afternoon. Just wanted to thank everyone in this panel. It's very nice to be part in this debate. We're wrapping up, and we'll start our next session at 4 p.m. in 15 minutes.
Dizer também que aqui na televisão a gente tem esse QR Code que leva para uma pesquisa.
We have a QR code here for a survey. We want to hear from you what your feedback is. It's a quick survey and it makes a huge difference for us. So if you can please answer the survey, we'll be very grateful. Thank you. Thank you to Canto Co-working. Please return your headsets on your way out. And you can already register for our next session. Also wanted to thank all of the funding partners of Casa Global, Baobá, Group of Volkswagen, Fundo Brazil, Fundo Casa Socioambiental, Global Giving, Clima e Sociedade, Global Alliance for Green and Gender Action, Itaúsa, Próspera Social, Global Fund for Community Foundations, Global Green Grants Fund, Bem-TV, Ibirapitanga, Havina, ACP, Sociedade, População e Natureza, and the Samdana Institute. Thank you, and I'll see you in a bit.
estatura mediana, com cabelo comprido, volumoso e cacheado. Estou vestindo um vestido marrom de renda, com alguns brilhos nas extremidades, uma plataforma marrom. Tenho braceletes nos braços e uma sereia grande tatuada no meu braço direito. Bom, gostaria de agradecer primeiramente a presença de todos vocês que estão aqui, quem nos acompanha ao vivo também no YouTube, e dizer a vocês que o painel funciona através dos fones. Então já está todo mundo com seus fones? Is everybody with your headsets?
Is everybody wearing headsets correctly?
Quero agradecer também a Sara Carriço e a Eridine Rangel, que são nossas
I would
maravilhosas.
like to thank Ana Carrizo, Marisa Canjel, that are our sign language interpreters.
Um espaço físico e simbólico de articulação política, mobilização, produção de conhecimento e colaboração para a filantropia de justiça socioambiental
We're then
entre
working
atores
here
global.
for
Queremos
philanthropy,
influenciar os fluxos de recursos
global
e as dinâmicas
South
de poder,
actors, and
garantindo
we
que as
really want to
soluções locais estejam no
influence
centro das
power
conversas
dynamics
globais
for them
sobre
to be in
financiamento
the
para clima e
center
natureza.
in terms of
A Casa
financing for
Global é uma
climate and
iniciativa da
nature.
Aliança Socioambiental
South
Fundo do Sul,
Global House
que neste ano
is
contam com a
part
parceria
of Regilon,
fundamental do movimento Shift to
Casa Fondos
Power
del
e da
Sur,
rede de fundos
now
comunitários
with
da
Ship to
Amazônia,
Power
reunindo
and the
dezenas de
Amazon
organizações da
Funds,
filantropia
with many
independente da
organizations
América
of
Latina,
independent
África
philanthropy of
e
Latin
Sudeste
America,
Asiático.
Asia, and Southeast
Estreando em plena COP30, a
Asia.
Casa Sul
Then
Global
here at
responde ao chamado da
COP30,
presidência
Casa
brasileira
Sul
a um
Global
mutirão
answers
global,
an
ou
appeal
seja,
of
a
Brazilian
cooperação entre
presidency
povos,
to a
setores e territórios
task
para
force
transformar
to
compromissos
unite
em
people,
ação.
territories,
Nossa
and
programação
make
nasce de um movimento
engagements
de
become
criação
actions.
coletiva, através das
Collective
chamadas propostas
creation,
abertas para membros,
proposals
redes
open
e
for
organizações
members,
parceiras.
networks, and
As quase 40
organizations that
atividades
are
enviadas
then
foram
partners.
avaliadas por um
The
comitê
activities
curatorial
were
integrado por representantes do Brasil,
assessed
Sudeste Asiático
by
e
a
África,
group that
e
had
das atividades
Brazilians
que compõem essa
from
linda
Southeast
programação.
Asia,
Então,
Africa,
muito obrigada
with this
a
beautiful
todos que fizeram
program we have
parte
today.
da
So thank you very
construção da
much
Casa Sul
to all of
Global.
you that
Em
built
especial,
Casa Sul
agradecimentos
Global.
também aos
We would like to
financiadores que
thank as
tornam
well the
possível
finance
essa realização.
that make this
Fundo Baobá para a
work
Igualdade
possible.
Racial, Fundação Grupo
Fundo Baobá,
Volkswagen, Fundo Brasil de
Volkswagen
Direitos
Group,
Humanos, Fundo
Fundo
Casa
Brasil,
Socioambiental,
Direito
Global
Human
Giving,
Rights,
Instituto Clima e
Global Giving,
Sociedade,
Casa
Global Alliance for Green and
Socioambiental,
Gender
Global
Action,
Alliance for
Itaúsa,
Green and Gender
Próspera
Action,
Social,
Itaúsa,
Global
Próspera
Fund for
Social,
Community Foundations,
Global Fund for
Green
Community
Grants Fund,
Foundations, Global Green
Bem-TV
Grant Funds,
Diversidade, Instituto
Bem-TV
Ibirapitanga,
Diversity,
Fundação Avina,
Ibirapitanga
Instituto
Institute,
ACP,
Avina
Instituto Sociedade,
Foundation,
População e
ACP,
Natureza e Desandana Institute.
and the
No dia de
Sandana
hoje, já
Institute.
tivemos uma mesa
Today
com o
we
Fundo
had a
Brasil de
round
Direitos
table
Humanos e
with
Labora
the
Fundo de
Fundo
Apoio ao
Brasil
Trabalho Digno.
and
Nossas mesas
Labora,
estão sendo transmitidas no
working
YouTube.
with
Então, caso
labor
vocês queiram,
causes.
podem
We are
assistir
transmitted in
em um
YouTube as
outro
well. If you
momento.
want, we can
Quero então
then
agora dar
watch
início ao
another
nosso painel da
time.
tarde,
We will
que
now
se chama
start our
Reconfigurando o
afternoon
Poder,
panel,
redes que impulsionam o financiamento
Reconfiguration of
justo para o Sul
Power,
Global. Gostaria então de
Networks,
passar a palavra
Equity
para
for the
Yas e
Global
para
South. I'll
Paula e
pass
pedir que
the floor
elas
to
e os
Paula
próximos
and Yas and
panelistas
ask them,
façam suas
as well as the
autodescrições
other
antes de começar.
panelists, to do an
Muito
auto
obrigada e um
description
ótimo
before
painel pra
starting. Thank you
gente.
so much, and let us have an excellent panel.
Alô? Vocês me escutam? Oi, pessoal, eu sou Yas.
Hello to you all, I'm Yaza. I work at the Comoa Network Programs Division. I'm a white woman, short hair. I have blue pants and beige shirt. 18 organizations, many different funds to support environment and rights. Those funds work together to reconfigure power dynamics in the philanthropy network. And to start off, it's very important to recognize our moment of financing of philanthropy, human rights, and environment. So we have to think about those financing dynamics. A shift must be done in terms of social environmental justice. We have funds creating actively a new financing architecture, more fair and with trust. We see many networks united for rights, working together, reconfiguring global power dynamics. And Casa Sul Global, this space where you are today as well, is the result of this way of working. We only exist thanks to the collaboration of networks and movements that had been for years working. Aliança Socioambiental, Fundo del Sur, como our network, Amazonia, and movements like Shift the Power, as Vittoria told us. So Casa in itself is a demonstration, a concrete one, of what we can build when we unite for a common purpose. Beyond Casa, Regilon is happy to work with many other networks like many networks, Comunalia, Territoria, among others, that really walk in the direction of just financing. I am Paula. I am communication leader at Alianza Socioambiental Fondos del Sur. I'm a white woman. I'm wearing a reddish dress, long hair, and today I'm very happy to be a moderator of this session together with Yasmin. Alianza Fondos del Sur is a network of local activists, many regions of the global south. All of them have the same goal, to ensure that resources really get to the communities and territories in a direct, flexible, and trustly manner. We are 16 funds today. Throughout the years, we have had $93 million for community initiatives, and today we have actions in more than 50 countries. And so underlining what Yasmin was saying, and especially in terms of power and resources, of course, how they are managed in this reconfiguration of power, the role of networks is central. In all of the global south, local organizations and communities that are doing an essential work for resources to really get to territories in a flexible, trustly manner with people that live in those territories. And together with that, networks like ours open political space, strengthen voices of those organizations, and foster real change that we need, so as that more resources really come to the front line. With advocacy, exchange of learning, capacity building, we help to build the conditions for a financing ecosystem that really shows the leadership of those at the front line. And that work in a network, we are here then to celebrate and to get to know better. I'll now invite for this panel session some of our guests. It's a round table that is very diverse as well. I would like then to call Priscila Santos, Network for Climate, our partner. I would like to call as well Margarita Antonio from the International Indigenous Women's Forum, INI Indigenous Women's Fund, and a member of the Prospero Network as well. And I would like to call Beatriz Maquenda from Trust Africa.
Erika Sanchez, do Instituto ACP.
Erika Sanchez from the ACP Institute. Isaac Rojas from the Global Green Grant Funds. And Charles Wumby from Pan-African Climate Justice Network. Right, so to explain how we're going to deal, we will see the strategical importance of being together to incide in a just financing and the challenges, potentialities of diversity and collaborative construction. We will try as well to hear from international partners what has been done to strengthen the network of Global South. We will then have a question for each of the panelists to get to know your work, and then we'll have Q&A sessions with the public. We ask all the panelists to introduce themselves, to do an auto description of themselves, as well to present the network they work with, and before starting answering questions, please. So I'll pass the floor back to Yasmin. She will ask the first question. good. Let us start off. Start with Pri. Belém has been this place uniting networks and people from many places, national and international, to debate those agendas that are so important for us. So the first question is, what's the importance of us to be together, to be here in the Amazon region, and to be able then to take our goals forward? Good afternoon to you all. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. It's the second week of COP. Some people are voiceless, although working so much, but here we are. And I would like to present then the network, Amazônicas for the Climate. We are women in our network, and it starts from a moment because people were talking about the Amazon region without Amazon women. So here we are. We work with forests, with oceans, with solid residue. What is it you want? So we created this network. It's really bringing together people from all the states in the Amazon region. And if there is a panel, one has to invite people from the region, which is so simple as it seems. And here we are today, such a symbolic moment with a COP in Belém do Pará, and we hope it to be, we want to be more and more present. We want to be, people stop talking about the Amazon without Amazon people and women. So indeed, we are a very dedicated group. We can do a lot and you can trust us. So COP is an example. Together, we can really, women from the Amazon region, to work seriously. We have been working a lot. We had to plan our partnerships, our speeches. We were criticized. There was doubt. There was a lot of prejudice. And to be here today, it's so special. This used to be the house of the RAC before the South Global South House. And indeed, it's a great honor. This is the house of many people, of diversity. It has all to do with the networks, the power of working together. Now, we have to say as well that we are 100 women, and we are from all the states in the Amazon region, and we continue to grow. So to start answering your question, I think that COP is indeed an example of the complexity. The things won't be able to be solved with one group. COP is very complex. The results won't be really solved by negotiators, you see. So one of the big results we have at this COP is not really negotiation, but it has to do with the struggle of indigenous people and First Nations in the streets when those 10 new indigenous areas were given, determined. So it shows that networks of indigenous people work a lot and very well. They have to be together. We need struggles in the streets, struggle for democracy, strengthen democracy, for the Amazon people to be seen. Global South has to be together in its diversity, and together we have to be really, we will be capable of facing those challenges and reconfiguring power. To have more people from the Amazon region and in decision-making processes is indeed very important. It's the reconfiguration of power, changing financing fluxes as well. So indeed, if we understand that many networks have common objectives, then we grow stronger. We are more and more prepared like that to face those systems that are so hard to face. Colonialism and patriarchy, sometimes people don't question them. So we have to question them, and we will be stronger together. Those networks has to be more inclusive, more diverse, more and more. So it's a great pleasure for me to be here today with a panel so diverse and full of people. I did not present myself at the beginning, so I'll do it now. I am a woman from the Amazon region. I'm not very tall. I have long hair, painted a bit blonde. I'm using acai fruits in my T-shirt. I have a white pants. I use glasses. Thank you, Pri. Excellent. Now I would like to invite Margarita to this debate. You are part of a network of indigenous women and feminist group as well. It's called Prospera. Margarita, I'll please ask you to introduce yourself, to talk about yourself, talk about the network as well, and then I will ask you a question in terms of the name of the fund, Aini. That's a Quechua word, right? It means reciprocity, equality, justice. How is it that as part of Prospera and Aini funds, how do you organize for resources to really get to indigenous women in a correct way with justice, reciprocity, and the relation of this struggle with struggles for financing, just financing? I'll pass you the floor. Good afternoon. I'm really very happy to be here today and to hear those youngsters in the previous session. They were excellent. They are outstanding, really, in this conference, a conference where we saw so much, so many youngsters, so many young women as well from every different culture and country, advocating for their rights, advocating for the climate, not only for the future, but advocating for today. This afternoon, I let's say, I represent the Aini Fund. On the one hand, first global Indigenous Women Fund, and after 15 years, we are still the only Indigenous Women Fund working globally, and that is something impressive, really. And precisely because of this fund, part of a mechanism, a bigger mechanism, the International Fund of Indigenous Women, we are part of a international network called Feminist Funds and Women's Funds that has this beautiful name, Prospera. So I would like to share with you a little bit of what we do at Aini and as well what we earn in terms of being part of Prospera. If you allow me, I will try as well to share some of my notes. And I want to say then that Prospera, we have 49 funds, feminist women funds, and based the global south. And for more than 25 years, we have been working in 172 countries. Each of those funds really, we conserve our autonomy. We are autonomous. But as well, we have a collaboration as one of the main things to do, in which we learn, we collaborate, and then as well, because we come from the movements. We're not a club, we're not a group organized to mobilize resources. The Aini Fund, for instance, is led by indigenous women and for indigenous women, and this is very important. It applies to all the rest as well. And for example, today we are here because one of our members, the Elas Fund from Brazil, also 20 years old, part of this global alliance, they said Prospera has to be here. And I would like to thank so much, Roberta, because really it was very important. Thank you for the invitation, Roberta. And I would like to also say that those who belong to Prospera, we work in multiple intersections and we unite climatic themes, environmental ones, feminist justice. And it's in this intersection precisely where indigenous women, where we found that we belong to this network of women's funds. Not only the I fund finances indigenous women, but very sorry to interrupt here in English translation. Now the sound is back here. So we talk about collective and individual rights, and they learned, and we are learning to recognize. There's still a lot to do, lot to learn, but we are, I believe, in the right track and with the best possible allies. Just to give you now some figures, for instance, and those are documented evidence. I did not invent this. The studies that were done by, they figured out that from 2016 to 2020, from $28.5 billion only that were destined to First Nations, only 1.4% was specifically destined to women. In another study conducted about financing, in that same period, financing specifically to indigenous people, only 8.7% of 4.5 billion, only 8.7% was destined to indigenous women and youngsters. In a study conducted by Prospera with finances for human rights, global green grants, and another fund, we figured that only one. So one has said that when one finances women, it's only about women's issues and themes, but those are themes for everyone. We do not cook only for ourselves. We don't wash for ourselves. We don't take care only of ourselves. We care first for the others, all the others, and then at last of ourselves. So we are here learning a lot, and we have really to go forward that way. Thank you so much, Margarita. That was amazing. Now we call Beatrice to our dialogue. Priscilla, you were talking a lot about the complexity of the themes we treat, the fact of talking about the Amazon without Amazon people, to be united, to be visible. Margarita also mentioned the fact that there should be more financing to women, indigenous women, the importance of them being together to be able really to have visibility, to change those figures you were mentioning, and that are absolutely real. And together with what they said, Trust Africa has been supporting the struggles for rights and democracy in the African continent, and to strengthen philanthropy as well in the region. So what is the relation you build between social justice, considering what we've mentioned till now, and philanthropy? And what's the importance of being in a network so that those teams are more and more together? I'll pass you the floor.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. Is it good afternoon or good evening yet? Yeah, but as indicated, my name is Beatrice Makwenda, and I work with a Pan-African foundation called Trust Africa. As a Pan-African foundation is led by Africans, but also for Africans. Our work is on focusing on strengthening democratic governance, championing equitable development in many different sectors, but also mobilizing African philanthropy towards African-led solutions. So, I thank you for the sharing, both my two sisters here. Is to really to say that when, as Trust Africa, philanthropy and social justice are very well connected. So we take philanthropy as a tool to address the why. Why, what is it, or what is the reason why we do what we do? And that is social justice. So philanthropy allows us to tackle the social justice questions, because what we are looking at is on how are we going to shift power. So when you talk about shifting power, it means we are dealing with people's rights, people's positioning within the development space, and people's positioning and voice and agency within these struggles. So philanthropy allows us to deal with those social injustices. So, and because we are dealing with the social injustices, it is not just about philanthropy bringing in money. The conversation is beyond money, is to shifting power. So because we want to shift power, we cannot afford to work in silos. And this is where networks become more important for us. So I am really grateful to even be here in Belém, connecting with Amazonia. We see how the voices of indigenous people, the youth, the powerful session we heard just before this one on really how the youth voices and agency is shaping the agenda. So all that, you cannot get it if you are not in a network. So the network therefore becomes your political infrastructure to really achieve shifting power. So this is where we say it is very important for us to connect in a network, because in a network, we are not necessarily dealing with the technical aspects of issues. We are dealing with the political education issues. So it's a place where you connect with the youth, with the women, with the indigenous, with scientists who are passionate about social justice issues, so that you create spaces to learn, collective learning, collective getting consensus, or what is it that we want to shift together. But also it is in a network where we have collective advocacy, because we realize that advocacy, in many cases, it's a game of numbers. So as we always say in African context, that if you want to go fast, then go alone, because you're going to run fast, but you'll not finish maybe 20 kilometers alone. You need somebody to encourage you, because in a network, this is where our work is anchored on solidarity, on care and support. So this is where you fuel ourselves going forward. So this is why networks are important. But also, because we are dealing with philanthropy plus social justice, we are looking beyond moving money towards projects, but you're looking at strengthening the ecosystem. So it is that infrastructure, the ecosystem building, that you get in a network. So networks are very powerful. They're very important, especially when we're dealing with shifting the power. So this is why we find networks, and would like always to connect to network, but also to channel financing and towards movement building, because that's how the ecosystem is built. Thank you very much.
Obrigada, Beatriz. Bom, agora que nós escutamos essas três vozes.
Thank you very much, Beatriz. And now, after those three voices, amazing women talking about the importance of being in a network, now we move to the other side of our round table and talk about the importance of funding those groups, funding those networks. So I'll pass the floor now to Paula so as to continue our debate. Yes, indeed, as Beatrice was saying, networks are infrastructure, strategy, politics, and we can be encouraged. And networks also need to be cared for very well. So indeed, now we have the perspective of family philanthropy, looking for institutional development, SCP, and strengthening those needs, talking about culture, learning, collaborative construction. So in your vision, how can networks be mechanisms of a change for civil society, and what kind of financing networks need to institutionalize this robust structure and collective building? And then what is family philanthropy and how it could then deal with that dimension.
Thank you for the question. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kika. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be here today. It is an honor to be here at COP. It's an issue, but anyway, I have, as I was saying, brown shoes, and well, let me tell you about ACP so you can understand what I'm talking about. This is a family philanthropy organization that was founded by a family. This family has a lot of money and chose to get a little bit of their money and put it into this organization so they can donate to other organizations. In this process, I think it's worth saying this is family Pipons. They're one of the main founders from Raya Drogasil, the drugstore chain. In this process of the ACP Institute construction, we decided that we were going to try and reinforce institutional development in Brazil. So that's the idea. We promote institutional development. We don't really have one specific cause. We work with different causes and organization profiles, and this is what we do. We work with many different organizations in Brazil. It is challenging. It is a large country, so we need different strategies to respond to different needs. I also like to say that most of what I know about institutional development I learned with organizations because I work really closely to them, and then we get to know and see a lot about these organizations. We ask if they're happy, what challenges they're dealing with in terms of planning, structure, finance, legal issues. So that's also interesting. You get to see a little bit more of that. So I'm going to try and answer all of the questions. Margarita, Priscila, and Beatriz have mentioned many reasons to support networks, especially led by women. But I will try to show you some more perspectives as well. By the way, I was listening to Engajamundo, and they were talking about something that is taboo, which is competition between different organizations. I mean, we have resources that are not enough for us to do everything we would like to do as civil society. And usually, whenever we have resources, there are new organizations trying to have access to them as well. So that exists nowadays. And when it comes to institutional development, a lot of people understand that. I mean, working with communication, people management, legal issues, financial planning, etc., to grow the organization. So I usually try to say that it's not about developing the organization. This is not the goal. Actually, it's about doing better what we already do. And things that we do in vulnerable conditions, in a way. Things that would need more of a structure, more reinforcement. And many times we think that if we have more money, we're going to be able to expand the organization. But then when we do that, it's complicated in terms of structure. We're dealing with the limitations of the structure. So for me, networks have a very important role when it comes to collaboration. So yeah, we can have a civil society that is very diverse. it's good to have many different organizations. I would rather have many small ones than a couple huge organizations. So it's good to have small, medium-sized, and large organizations. And I think we still have a challenge ahead of us in terms of those who are donating and those who are receiving donations, in terms of the coordination of this work. So how can we work with the agendas in a way that is complementary? How can we create structures that can be collaborative? I think Reconfiguring has a good example of that, which is the alliance of the territorial funds. And I think these things, they're more potent in a network, really. So networks have a very special place in terms of promoting collaboration, and they can do even more in that regard. Coordinate in a more sophisticated way, to be disruptive, to create new ways of doing things, coordinating things within a network. It's also about building ecosystems. They're fundamental for that as well. In our agenda, for instance, we chose something very specific to work, and I like that. My agenda is the institutional development of the civil society organization. So I go around the world talking about this specifically. And I could talk about many things. I could be talking about strengthening civil society in other instances as well, but I like to talk about this. One of the things that we've been trying to do at the ACP Institute is to create this system. I mean, nowadays it exists, but it's not very well coordinated. So one of the things that we have done with many organizations was to create a platform that will bring what everyone can do, in the sense that instead of knowing that Reconfiguring offers this or that a consultancy will offer something, or GIF has created something, I don't know. You just go to this place where you see all the material, you have visibility of those who are doing that without having to know that you have all these organizations. So it's about creating an ecosystem for institutional development and valuing that and making it legitimate and presenting that to more people. I think that's what this is about. And well, we're probably going to run out of time, so I'm going to turn it over to you again. Thank you.
Tão grande, às vezes tão complexo, né, que mapa é interessante. Nós vamos então passar para o Isaac.
Very well. Let's now talk about this perspective of the international funding agent, and from the Global Green Grants Fund, could you tell us more about the importance of having networks in the Global South to promote trust and autonomy in the field of financial support? Hi, everyone. I'm going to be speaking Spanish. Hopefully, I will be speaking Portuguese next time I come to Brazil. It is a language I really like. So I'm going to describe myself. I am bald. I have white beard. We were talking about the youth, but I'm no longer a young person, I would say, but at least I am wiser, hopefully. I am from Costa Rica. I live in Uruguay, and I work with the Global Green Grant Funds ever since the beginning of the year, so it's recent. I used to work with the ecology movement in Costa Rica, in Latin America, and over the past few years, globally, really. So that's my experience. The Global Green Grant Funds works with networks ever since the beginning. That's part of our identity. The way we distribute resources is through networks, our internal networks. And that has committees, regional or theme committees. Every committee will have many people, counselors, as we call them, who have knowledge about their country, their region, or a subject. And we do that because nobody knows everything. And even if we know a lot about something, there will always be someone who knows a little bit more or will give us a different perspective to that. Besides the committees, we also work with regional funds. In LATAM, we work with certain funds. Here in Brazil with Fundo Casa. They also help us understand the dynamics and the challenges that there are. I was in Colombia a couple of weeks ago for the Andes Council meeting, and we understood what the referendum was about for the Colombian government. And it's a very complicated thing, having a referendum to change constitution in terms of the presence and the importance of indigenous peoples. So these dialogues, they allow us to understand that a little bit more. And we've been doing that for a while. From the very beginning, in 1993, really, we started participating in other alliances, Lima, Gaga, We Do, and some others. So we like that. We know it's complex, but life is complex. So we have to understand that. And we know that working in a network is necessary from a philanthropy standpoint. And it's very evident, I think, it was very evident last week to see those convergence processes between different social movements in the world, something that a couple of years ago seemed to be impossible. And nowadays in LATAM, the feminist movement, the ecology movement, union workers, everyone's working together, and they're having access to spaces of incidence where they have the support of philanthropy. And I think that's also something that we're doing together. Well, it's not about doing things together just because we think it's nice. It's not that we're doing things together to go have some beer. I mean, we are trying to have some political influence here. And that's the goal, the political goal. Our strategy, our view of what we have to do, that needs to be very clear from the beginning. And thanks to that, we're going to be able to walk together for longer. We're going to analyze what is happening, what the structural causes are, how we're going to deal with them, who is going to accompany us in that mission. We want to work in a specific way, and that's legitimate. And this is a very important exercise because that's going to give us a long-lasting possibility of building something, especially building networks. It's not just about participating. As was said before, this is something that we have to do on a daily basis, and this is something that also requires a lot of work. So we have to be interested in each other, also to build trust. and autonomy. So trust in political constructions is very important, and it comes from these practices where we're trying to include more people, where we're trying to work as a team, we're trying to understand each other and do something together. We were saying that if you want to go really far, you have to, if you want to go really quickly, you have to go alone. But if you want to go really far, you have to go as a group. And that's true. So here we're talking about philanthropy. We're talking about advocates. We're talking about many important topics. The blue zone is also a labyrinth, I would say, full of important matters that are being discussed.
Oui.
We're having issues with the microphone.
Y había jurado no volver a una COP de la Convención de Cambio Climático porque es un espacio.
So as I was saying, this is a space that is full of corporate interests, and many governments will defend that. But in the current scenario, we need to establish conversations. We need to negotiate. That's very important. It's something that we have to do still, even if we don't like it. And autonomy is also built thanks to political trust. We know that our colleagues, we don't have to remind them of what to do. We don't have to remind everyone. We're just doing things. And hopefully in a happy way, enjoying it, enjoying the process. Well, working in a network will also allow us to see things, the beautiful things, the transforming things that are happening, because not everything is bad. We are facing a difficult moment around the world, but there are nice things as well. We were talking about agroecology. Some people were from Central America were talking about their experience there. Colleagues in Brazil as well, talking about how they had autonomy and rights for women, and been trying to have more equity, how forests are being taken care of as well, how the Quilombola communities are being taken care of or being recognized. And we have to keep that in mind. We have to remember that solutions are going to allow us to deal with these crises. We have to strengthen the leadership of these communities because they are transformative. It's not what they're trying to sell to us here in the convention, more equity. Anyway, make your territory private. I think besides all that, we had two social movements for food sovereignty. We also had the Summit of the Peoples. That was also beautiful to see. We can talk about philanthropy. We can talk about how to get together, how to complement what we're doing, using our spaces to grow as well, because that's also important. And our work in a network will allow us to understand what is happening around the world. Some of the restrictions, some of the financial controls that national groups have to deal with. In our last panel, we were saying that we're talking about legal issues, and there are many things, many laws that are now being discussed in Ecuador, in Nicaragua, and many other countries where you need a certain amount of requirements to receive that money. So it's impossible. So our work and work in networks allows us to see these local groups finding solutions, learning lessons, and that's useful for the local communities that we work with. So networks are important. They really help us grow. They help us have that political trust, that autonomy to be able to deal with the structural causes that we're working with. Thank you. Thank you. It's interesting to hear about the benefits of a network based on trust and based on common ideals. I also want to speak Spanish. I really like your language. Well, let me get back to, yes, for the third round now. Questions. Well, since we've been talking about networks and supporting networks, I think I'm going to turn it over to my colleague here to start this third round of questions, talking about challenges and the potential benefits of being in a network. You represent the network for climate justice, and I know you work with over 2,000 players in Africa to deal with climate justice. How can you articulate the challenges and the potential benefits of all that diversity in the region?
Now, I don't know which language to use because there's Spanish, there's Portuguese. Hola. Tudo bem. Mi nombre es Chari Pedro, Bego de Africa, Kenya, and that is the end of my Spanish. So therefore, you allow me to use English because I know there's translation. So good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Charles Mwangi, like it was mentioned, and I come from Africa, one of the 55 countries in Africa called Kenya. I work for an organization called Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. And that is arguably the biggest civil society network focusing on climate justice. So we are basically a movement, and a movement that is driving change across the continent of Africa. We came to be in year 2008, and it was upon realization that the climate justice concept was being defined somewhere else in the north. And we felt we were not really represented, in terms of how climate justice was being interpreted and how it was being understood, how it was being defined. And we felt that the African continent, contributing only 4% of total greenhouse gases emissions, but experiencing perhaps the worst impact of climate change, ranging from drought, from France, and so on and so forth. Where my sister comes from, they have experienced more than 7, I think, cyclones. At the moment, there are people who are still living, in, should I say, refugee camps, simply because their homesteads were actually destroyed, by floods and so on and so forth. So with all these impacts happening in the continent, we felt we are the people who are wearing the shoe, and therefore we know where the shoe pinches. So therefore, we thought it was time to redefine climate justice in the continent and really develop our own African narratives about climate justice. Because we cannot have concepts being drawn somewhere else and they are planted in Africa. You copy and paste, and it doesn't really work for the continent. So we felt we needed a homegrown organization that can be able to articulate our homegrown, solutions to the climate crisis that affect, the continent. So therefore, in our constituency, we will find young people, the youth, who form the biggest constituency, and especially because Africa has 75% of our population being young people. So it's a constituency you cannot be able to ignore. We have women groups, we have small-scale farmers, we have pastoralists, we have faith actors, we have farmers, we have private sector players. It is a diversity of organizations. So across the continent, we are in 54 countries, minus west of Sahara. which is, we call it the country in exile, but we are present in all those other countries within the continent. And we have more than 2,000 networks, which means there are more than 2,000 organizations working in the continent. And our model of working is that we work through what we call national designated or DNP or designated national platforms. Designated national platforms are platforms at the national level that curate the climate justice agenda within their context as a country. And we have therefore 54 designated national platforms. At the country level, you also realize we have what we call subnational platforms, that goes all the way to the districts or to the counties, depending on administrative structure on any given country. What that means is that we're able to do or to develop our advocacy agenda all the way from the grassroots, because ours is to stand with communities at the front line of climate crisis. So therefore, our agenda is curated all the way from the grassroots and coming all the way to national level. And together, we are able to curate, continental level agenda. So therefore, we're able to influence many processes globally, but many processes also at the regional level. But I also want to indicate that in terms of how then we work, we are able to form partnerships with other like-minded networks. And therefore, we normally say that we are convener of dialogues. And this is done again within the principle of procedural justice, which dictates that you must actually give voices to the most vulnerable. So that as we come to COP, which is an international process, a global process, then the agenda that you bring here, we are bringing an agenda that have been curated all the way from the grassroots, and therefore representing the voices of the marginalized at that particular level. So we don't like bringing elite kind of concepts, elite kind of conversations, but we bring conversations that really speaks to the communities at the grassroots, the communities at the front line of climate crisis. But we also work in consortia with other Pan-African institutions. We have, for example, Pan-African Parliament, which curates the legislative agenda for the continent. And when it comes to matters environment and climate change, we are their principal partner. I remember in year 2023, we were able to work with Pan-African Parliament in hosting one of the largest conference for all the parliamentarians in Africa and the speakers of national assemblies in Africa. And we were able to develop climate resolutions that were debated across almost all countries in the continent. And that's how we also influenced the Pan-African institutions. We were working very closely with the Africa Union Commission, the Africa Development Bank, and United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And we come in as the only civil society actor in that regard through what we call the Crime Death Partnership, which is a partnership that was sanctioned by African heads of states, meaning that even at government level, they are now recognizing the role of non-state actors in driving processes. If you go to the Africa Pavilion, you'll get to see the AU or the Africa Union, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, AFDB, and PACCHA will be there as the only non-state actor constituency, and we create, agenda within that particular platform. So it is not just about forming, networks between ourselves as civil societies, but for us to influence some of these important regional and global processes, we also have to form partnerships, with the government institutions, but also with other partners so that we're able to drive, that influencing. We are only coming from one of the biggest, climate events in Africa that we call the Africa Climate Summit, which happened in the month of September. And PACCHA was actually in charge of coordinating all the non-state actors. And we had about 16 clusters. We had farmers, we had faith groups, we had nature-based, groups, we had indigenous communities, and we were able to bring them together to ensure participation of non-state actors is not ignored. And we were part and parcel of the planning process. But before then, 2 years before, we had the first Africa Climate Summit where our space was not given, and we had to fight for it. But this time around, we are getting to see that governments, even the African Union, is getting to see the importance of non-state actors. What does this mean? That when you are seen to work together, when you work in consortium, when you are many of you, they cannot afford to ignore you. And therefore, we must continue building these networks. And beyond the continent, we must really work together, especially the global South, civil society, and non-state actors. Our pride is common. Our problems are almost homogeneous across the board. At the moment, we are all fighting for climate finance. We are fighting for global goal for adaptation, complete with means of implementation. And that is what Brazil is pushing for. That is what Africa is pushing for. That is what the people in the Caribbean are actually pushing for. And therefore, our problems are the same. Our problems are common. But we must work together if they have to listen to us. But if we are divided, then it is very easy that we are simply going to be downtrodden. But when they see us working together, then people will afford to listen, because critical mass is very, very important. We therefore believe in fostering partnership, global South partnerships. And indeed, when we came here, because we arrived here on 7th, we decided to actually organize our pre-COP, which we normally organize prior to beginning of the official sessions of COP. And we did that together with the networks, Brazilian networks. We had Tinoco and her organization and Pora. We had Dulce. And at the moment, as we are talking, we have another event, an African Pavilion, again with the networks of civil societies from Brazil. And we brought together everyone so that we actually conducted one common pre-COP, which is a big statement that our problems are the same. And therefore, we can work together in driving solutions and proposing solutions together. And that is the reason why, again, we are here in this conversation, again, connecting with our brothers and our sisters from the global South, because we must reason together. Last year at COP29, we had to connect with civil societies from Azerbaijan, who were also part and parcel of the convening that we had here. And we did the first, again, pre-COP there, again, with the civil society from Azerbaijan. In other words, what we are saying is that we cannot afford to work together. We are in an era where people have to connect forces. We have to leverage on our comparative advantages, our comparative capacities for us to be able to drive, these movements. So movement building is something that we cannot afford, to let go. And I want to indicate that, again, within the Africa constituency again, and I know that could be the case also in many parts of the global South, we must not ignore our young people, because indeed, the real solutions for the future will probably come from these young people. We may have failed them in our generation, but I think the creativity we have seen in our young people, and of course, talking now from the African continent, I think it's immense potential. But I think we need a lot of nurturing of youthful constituency. And within PACTIA, we have a program that we started that is focusing on building the capacity of our young people to prepare them for the challenge ahead. And we have a program we call the Nairobi Summer School on climate justice, which is a program that brings together more than 500 young people for a 2-week course with a faculty of 70 professors, including professors of practice. We have done that in 2021, 2022, 23, 24, and last year we did the 5th cohort at the sidelines of the Africa Climate Summit. Now, what started as an African program covering young people from across the entire continent has become a global program. Last year, we had applicants from 141 countries. And I remember last year, we had participation from Brazilians in that particular convening. So I think some of these programs are very important. Let's sharpen the skills of our young people. Let us also, train them how to actually take up our Southern, narratives. Because if we don't train them to do so, somebody is going to format their brain. They are going to be given different concepts from somewhere else. And those may not necessarily be Southern concepts. So we really must actually curate our narratives based on our felt realities and based on what we think are our solutions. The global South must also not be seen as victims. We are not just victims. And I think we need to transition from just being victims to change agents. We must actually be able to drive. I was telling people that in Africa, for example, we say that without Africa, there's not just transition. Why? Because cobalt, lithium, and all those are critical minerals that are needed for transition are basically in the continent, in Africa, in Congo, in Zambia, and those other countries. But what is happening is that we are getting to see 1 ton, exploitation of these mineral resources, so that when Africa will be ready for transitioning, the minerals will have long gone. And we are saying we must therefore improve our natural resource governance. But how are we going to do it? when our governments are colluding with other governments to steal from the people. It is the work of non-state actors. It is us civil society actors that must stand strong in terms of protecting our natural resources and ensuring that we're able to bequeath, a future to our coming generations and a future that they are going to enjoy. So allow me to stop at that level and maybe we can interact more through questions. Thank you.
Vida, obrigada, Charles. Gente, eu tenho uma notícia boa e uma notícia ruim.
Thank you so much, Charles. It was very nice. Thank you. I have good and bad news. The good news is that this discussion will continue, the debate, the network. But there's a bad news. We don't have much time and we'll have to conclude. But before to do so, I would like to invite you all now for a Q&A session. If you have any doubts, any questions, please do. Q&A session is opened and we will be passing the mic.
Não sei se tem mais alguém que trabalha em rede, que identifica desafios, potencialidades, que gostaria de somar aqui ao
those who work in networks that would like to maybe have a question or comment to contribute before we conclude.
Oi, gente. Deixa eu só tirar aqui para não dar um eco aqui. Então, boa tarde, me chamo Pedro, né? Eu sou coordenador geral.
I am Pedro, coordinator of an organization called MERI. We work in the region of Castanhal, not very far away from Pará, and we work with organizations in rural and peripheral communities. So we work with many different topics, social environmental, but also with food production, water, and we strengthen the grassroots organizations. For me, it was really interesting to hear you all because the discussion is so rich. How can we really make this distribution of resources, this process of decentralization of power, resources, this experience in Kenya I had last year, I got to see the organizations closely, and I can say that we are distant in a way, but very close in another. Problems are very similar. Especially youngsters, we see that we have to be in other organizations, other kind of work, to be able to be really together. We have to be together. We have to narratives, not only leaders, community leaders, but we want professionals, well-formed. We have a lot of barriers and challenges in terms of resources, access to those funds, finances, donators, resource distribution, and it's very important for them not to be so bureaucratic. That's what's going to make them get really to projects and grassroots. Sometimes we really do not want some logics to continue. Some groups fight against the vulnerability of territories, and we want to have projects that really make a difference. Before then, be in terms of audit and preparation. So it's hard. We have periods in time, we have to be very organized in terms of bureaucracy and forms and reports. So those are things that we need really to have a different posture. So really to bring this perspective, to underline territory, to really be present in this debate. If we want to decentralize power, I must say we also have to go beyond financing organizations, international ones, and we need to have the perspective of territories and communities. In communities, things are hard, there's mental health issues as well. Everyone has burnouts, borderline, so many problems. And this is because we need to do so much for things to be able to last. So many scarce resources and so much work to do. So indeed, it's very hard for us, and we must strengthen our debate. We have to be together. Those processes have to be, we have very powerful initiatives, as others do as well. We have to exchange. We have to think of transformation in the territories. We sometimes have a colonial vision still of financing of those resources, and that has to change. And sometimes it's concentrated always in the same organizations located in the south of Brazil, between Rio and São Paulo. But this country is very big. There are many cities, many spaces, many regions, many communities. So this is how I would like to react to what I heard here today. Thank you very much, and let us not continue doing the same things. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pedro, for your contribution. Great to hear you. Indeed, it dialogues a lot with what we have been saying here and exchanging. I'll pass the floor to Paula now. We will then start concluding. And for all of you panelists, if you want to comment on what Pedro said, please do as well. Yes, unfortunately, very short time. We have now a couple of minutes to try and answer and react. But so going back to what Pedro says, the role of networks to be able to foster just financing for the global south. Let us then try and answer Pedro in a couple of minutes, please. Who wants to start? Who would like to start? I can do so. Your question shows the importance of the networks. So in the debates here at COP, many times one asks, how can small organizations, territories sit together with financiers, with donators? There's a big distance. There are many challenges for that. And in terms of numbers and quantity, there are many more organizations than finances. It shows precisely the concentration of resources in Brazil and all around the world. So to be able to take those demands, the analysis of the territory, to what really hurts, the wounds we have, and take them forward. Indeed, physically, it's not possible to have all the organizations, grassroots organizations, together talking with the donators and financing institutes we have. So we need those networks to be strong. We need to have spokesperson, indeed, that have to be chosen, and that is responsibility as well. The closer one is to not to money, but the closer you are to those decision making, the biggest your responsibility in terms of demands, questions, and main topics. So to broaden, of course, consciousness, the awareness of those who are donating, and vice versa, of those as well that are receiving in the territories. Who's next? Who would like to answer? I think
Oi, agora sim? Eu acho que se a gente olhar para o tamanho desse desafio,
if we look at the size of the challenge to multiply financing to the global south, we need an ecosystem vision. As Erika said, if we look at an ecosystem, each animal will have its pace, its role, so not everyone needs to be a monkey or a lion. We need all the animals. We need bees, pollinize, we need different roles, different organizations that are not defending precisely only their existence, but the existence of an ecosystem that can be more robust and more resilient. And why do we need more collaboration? Because we are living in our world a crisis, not only climate crisis, but a democracy crisis as well. We see authoritarian governments taking power, governments that have decided to invest much more in defense, guns than in climate change. So we have problems with funds, of course, that are going to those countries, developed countries, then the ODAs. We have less money now because of that as well. We have more wars and conflicts. We live in a world full of wars in so many places. And if we don't understand ourselves as an ecosystem and those different layers of the territory until the great global finances, we have to collaborate. We need to have a social tissue of this ecosystem. It has to be robust. Otherwise, we won't be able to face those crises that come one after the other. So one has to think of common goods. One has to realize that we have many challenges and we will not be able to face them alone. And I think as well that we have to try and bring those worlds together. We are here discussing, but it's important as well to say that the Global South has an agenda. We think strategy. We just don't want money to get here full of tags saying where it has to go. Because here we think, here we can dialogue with territories. We have solutions territory based. So we have to have autonomy to think and implement as well. So the North, the global North, must want to be part of this ecosystem and understand that throughout history they have been at stage, and now it's time for them to leave stage and give space for us to talk about ourselves, for us to now show our ways and our paths and our ways of doing.
Gracias por todas las
intervenciones. Thank you so much for all of you panelists, all that has been said, and thinking now what we are doing from women's funds. This moment in time, there is really a big problem to finance equity, and it's not equivalent to the strength we have gathered in those movements. It's not one movement. We are movements, and we are in every region of this planet. So we are advocating for more financing. We are asking for more resources, but as well, we are asking to change the way financing is given, to recognize the practices that exist in the global south, the diversity we have, to recognize what is possible to be done with our participation. And it's not that we will be able to do that with those financing resources, but we can do that because of what we have given in terms of what we know, of how we live, our culture, our ways, forming those beautiful networks that are not chains. You know, that chains get broken at some point, but we are different. We always rebuild networks, and with all our colors, we are always together. And we want, in that same sense, to transform power relations with a better distribution in the global south, as you said, sister.
Yeah, thank you so much for the reflections. I think maybe in joining what has already also been said, also the reflections that had come from the floor, is that I think at this particular moment we look at philanthropy in a way that really transforms how things are done in terms on how money moves to support the work of social movements. So with that, it means that we should focus on philanthropy that is distributing money, but really the one that is focusing on distributing power. So for that to happen, we need to funding that's supporting organizing. So organizing the youth, the women, the farmers, everyone, but also supporting the movements in terms of movement building. And we should also then recognize that we are dealing with an issue of trust because we must start from somewhere. We may find institutions that are not yet set up. There might be people that are just coming together in terms of movement. So it is really about trust, to trust that people can craft an agenda and move the flexibility that is needed for them to support the work. And I think for us, even within the network and in philanthropy, we must change the narrative on what climate action is. And since we are here in COP30, we are dealing with the having an implementation call. What is climate action for us? And for us, to be honest, is that also to also rethink, to say, when you strengthen democracy, to strengthen civic space for people to participate, to defend their land, their forests, their commons, that is climate action. So for us, we need also to rethink on what we define what climate action means for us, and then how funding should support the work that it is. So in closing is to really say that social justice philanthropy does strengthen movements, and then movements are the one that will shift power and decolonize a lot of things that we are dealing with. Yeah.
Just a few words around climate finance. I think even as we look through a philanthropy and how, of course, it can support our work as networks, I think we must also know through the bigger picture. There is a lot of climate finance hypocrisy in the globe. And I think what we are calling for is a total, overhaul of the finance architecture as it is globally. One of the biggest problems that we are experiencing, even within this climate justice space, is the fact that climate finance is not coming in the form that is supposed to be available in the continent. Look at this GCF. We are still getting countries in the global south attracting resources in form of grants. In form of loans. Even though sometimes I call them concessional loans, but you cannot come put my house on fire and then give me a loan to reconstruct my house. It doesn't make sense at all. Or you burn my house and then you come and sell to me a fire extinguisher. Again, it doesn't make sense at all. And I think we really must call out, especially to the developed country parties here, that indeed climate finance must be available in form of grants. The global south is not responsible for the climate challenges we're experiencing, but the impacts are being felt in the global south. Now, I'm trying to look at loss and damage and how we are celebrating now the Barbados mechanism. But look at how much money has been put there. Only 583 million is what is available for the countries in the global south to address the issues of loss and damage. If I ask her how much Malawi needs to address loss and damage, that 583 is not even enough for one country. But I saw last year, one country in the world financing war to a tune of 95 billion. So there's no scarcity of money in the world. But I think we have our priorities wrong. And I think that's what we really need to bring out. One of the biggest conundrum or the issues that are being negotiated here, even within the global goal on adaptation is a means of implementation. We want to develop a goal which doesn't have means of implementation, and means of implementation means finances, it means technology transfer, but we are shying off from that, and we are being now pushed to private sector. We are being pushed to looking at our own domestic, budgets, yet we are actually very struggling to repay loans. And when you give countries loans in the interest that is actually higher than the rate at which their GDP is growing, then what are we saying to the global south? I think we really must call on the developed country parties, even as we do our negotiations here, that climate finance must be available in form of grants and not in form of loans, because countries are already sinking into deeper loans. And people must take responsibility. Look at the whole question of NDCs, national determined contributions. We were duped to believe that we also have a contribution in terms of reducing the emissions, which is true. But if you look at the continent of Africa, even if we reduce our emissions by 100%, we only account for only 4% removal. What about the 9% required for us not to reach the 1.5 degree temperature rise? We have to actually be very sincere that we also call on our developed country partners to actually submit ambitious NDCs, just like we from the South are submitting ambitious NDCs. But most importantly, the means of implementation must be seen in just transition. It must be seen within the global goal adaptation. We must see it, within the new, text that we're expecting, from Belém. Thank you.
Yo nada más les agradecería, ¿verdad?, por lo que dijeron, por cómo compartieron las experiencias.
I just wanted to thank you so much how you shared the experience, knowledge, the importance of growing together. Thank you. Thank you all so much, all the panelists, so comments, reflections. I will pass then the floor to Victoria, thanking you all very, very much once again. Thank you all. It was great. This was a great panel. And thank you to all of you present here today discussing with us and learning so much. Those on YouTube as well, thank you so much for presence. And tomorrow will be our last day at the Casa Global. We have a panel at 10 and a second at 2 p.m. So you can use your QR code to register, call people, invite friends for the Casa Global, and do partake in this survey we are doing. There will be a form, can be answered in a couple of minutes, just for us to have a feedback of how you are, your perception of our work. Thank you, Isabella Canto. You are the responsible for this co-working space and has been so good for us. Great host. Please follow us in our networks. That's important as well, social network. And do not forget, please, to hand back the headsets to Sophia. Our team will be assisting you and helping you with any need. And little by little, then we will ask you then to leave the Casa Global. I would like to thank Fundo Baobá, Volkswagen Group, Brazilian Fund of Human Rights, Fundo Casa Socioambiental, Global Giving, Ethan Society, Itaúsa, Próspera Social, Global Fund for Community Foundations, Global Human Funds, Bem-Te-Vi Diversidade, Ibirapitanga, Fundação Avina, and the ICP Institute, Population Nature Institute, and the Santana Institute. Thank you all very much once again, and see you tomorrow.